Well, as Christelle said, this was inspired by Fumiko several years ago. For those of you that have been around for a while, she gave a presentation on Pomo, and I was really intrigued. It was the freeness and the expressiveness of creating this and not really having to think about it a lot, which is always wonderful because then you're really free to play. And the thing that was so wonderful was that you take this large sort of a broadside that you create, and then you find these little vignettes, these smaller little paintings within. And it was just intriguing to me. So I did a little more study on this. And even though it is an ancient Chinese technique, um, the results look really contemporary. So to start out, I thought I'd give you a little backgrounder with hold on here, with a little PowerPoint. So hold on while I bring it up. Okay. So I learned in my studies of this that even though it was developed back in like the 8th century China, it really was brought to the forefront in about the mid 1500s. And it was kind of developed by a Chinese artist named Zhu Wei. And at the same time, there was also a technique being developed, a wet-on-wet kind of technique being developed in Japan called tarashikomi. I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it was a wet-on-wet technique, very similar to Pomo that was happening in China. But both of them were developed at about the same time. And there's a whole side story behind Zhu Wei. He was considered to be mentally deranged because his pieces were so highly expressive and abstract, but they were really pretty well thought out. And another reason they thought he was deranged is because he killed his third wife and he went off to prison. But he was also a calligrapher and a poet and an artist in many different ways. And he liked to do this wet on wet, sort of the dark ink and the lighter wet ink, which sort of created this velvety effect, like over here on the right is kind of a good example of that. And anyway, he was a colorful figure and he was a loner in the Chinese art world, but he really did some very free-spirited and exciting stuff. So I'm excited to share this with you with a nod to our wonderful Fumiko. Okay, as I said, it was originally developed in 8th century China, and it's a splashed ink technique. And it's done typically or traditionally with a sumi brush and sumi ink on heavily sized shuen. And heavily sized because you're really getting into the paper when you're creating this and going to town with these splashes and the swipes and the things that you do with Pomo. The brushed forms are really created freely with sweeping strokes, a lot of wet on wet, splattering with a brush or, like for those of us today with a toothbrush. And you can also add small amounts of red and white ink just for asemic writing for some interest. So very wet ink can be reshaped. And again, this is why you would use a heavily sized shuen or even a shikishi board so that you can move that ink around. And for contrast to the intense black sumi, the artist also uses various tones, variegated tones of ink. And as I mentioned, a shikishi board is really a good substrate for this because it is harder and it also eliminates the need for mounting of the rice paper later. As a matter of fact, if I go back here for just a sec, this one right here was done on a shikishi board. So there was more opportunity to move that ink around. Okay, here are some examples of Pomo. Here's this very wet on wet with little bits of Chinese white and red ink added. You can see the wet, lots of contrast with this. The wet in contrast with the strong, intense sumi. Very wet here, and a little bit of red in the background before the splatters went on, which was just added some interest. And here the red added for some asemic writing. This was also done on a shikishi board. So up here, well, I'll go on here. Here's an example of very wet ink that was blown on, and you can see the splatter was created that way and against the really velvety wet on wet that happens alongside it. This was done over here with a variegated brush, loaded with sumi just on the tip, and then some white. This, I think I added some white in a little fine liner squeeze bottle on that, just for some interest. So this is what Fumiko was talking about, is how you could take this broadside or this large sheet of paper and you can find these wonderful little vignettes. So they could be standalone pieces, or you could use them for lots of other kinds of applications. So here's a typical pomo piece that has a combination of, some swipes and some splatters and some hits with the brush, but it's just a combination of a lot of different things. This was done, if you remember when Karen did a presentation for us a while back, she used flat stones. You can put a stone down before you do your splatter effect, and it gives you a wonderful open space that can so easily be like a moon or something like that. So here are some of my favorite pomo brushes and tools. I love working with these handmade brushes that I made myself because they have these wonderful long tendrils at the end, which are just great for dripping and splattering. A toothbrush, this is a synthetic kind of brush that works much like a toothbrush for a splatter effect. I like to start out with just a quick swipe with a foam brush, and sometimes I load that in a variegated way too. So it's got a very light tone across it, and then dip the corner maybe in a little bit of sumi. So it gives you a really nice effect. I usually have a small brush available so I can do some little finished asemic writing and that type of thing. This is some balsa wood, just on a tongue depressor. So there's just all kinds of things that you can use for tools, and the sky is really the limit. It's fun to just experiment with so many different things. So when I taught a class a couple of years ago called Make Your Mark, we did a project that was very pomo related. So I introduced pomo to that class, and we created these broadsides. And when I use the term broadside, it's really a printing term or a bookmaking term. But in the Sumi Marks context, it is just creating a very large piece or sheet of paper. And it can be shuen, heavily sized shuen, or it can be watercolor or other kinds of paper as well. But we created these big broadsides using several tones of sumi and several of the pomo techniques, the wet on wet, the splatter, all of those different kinds of things. And as I mentioned, it can also be, even though traditionally it's done on shuen paper, it can also be done on a harder surface paper like watercolor paper. And I've done a lot of those, and I'll share those with you in just a couple of minutes. So creating a broadside, this is important down here. Creating a broadside should be joyful and freeing. And you really don't need to put a lot of thought and planning into creating a piece. So here is what got me excited when Fumiko was presenting this a few years ago, is that you can find these just lovely little smaller paintings within this larger piece. And you really only need one of these black viewfinders, which, by the way, I create from black poster board from Dollar Tree. I have a whole bunch of them because when I was teaching in the classroom before the pandemic, I had, of course, one for everyone. So I had a whole bunch of them. But I used all of them here just to show you the different things that you can find within these wonderful larger Homo broadsides. And then we cut the pieces, and usually you should probably use scissors because especially if your paper is still a little bit damp and it's Schwen, a craft knife is going to tear it up. So scissors or a paper cutter along those. Oh, by the way, with the viewfinder, you take a pencil and you just draw around the center of that. And so then that's what you're cutting apart. And then instead of wet mounting, we use this Scotch positionable mounting adhesive, which comes in a roll like this. Many of you are probably familiar with this. So you unroll it and lightly mount the pieces. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces that have been placed on this. Then you cut off that piece. And then this comes with a protective release paper, which doesn't, because this stuff is very sticky. It doesn't stick to the stickiness of the tackiness of the paper. And you turn this over on that protective release paper and burnish it down. And then you trim those pieces, and then you slowly peel off the backing and mount it on white masa or any kind of white mounting paper, and you burnish it down. I'll show you some samples of that in just a minute. And then the fun part is determining the orientation. And most of the time, these pieces will tell you what's the top and what's the bottom, and should they be vertical, should they be horizontal. But it's fun. That's a fun part of the process to determine your little, the orientation of your little piece. And then you trim to the desired size, and then you mount it on, I usually use black or red cardstock. And then there are all kinds of things you can do with that. You can make cards. I am into bookmaking, so I've made a lot of books. I made a Homo sample book that I'll show you. I might have shared that with some of you at one of the previous meetings. I can't remember, but I'll show you again. And then you can make mobiles. You can use these for collage. And I've made a number of books that I just really enjoy. My idea of just a lovely day is to create one of these and just spend some time in the studio putting them together. And then if you use watercolor paper or Arches Text Wove, which is a paper that I really like because it loves water and it dries flat, can you see these pencil lines here? You can divide this off into on this particular sheet, 9 separate little vignettes, and then you take tape and run it across the lines, center it on the lines. And a lot of times I'll make little notes down here at the bottom as to what I used, what tools I used, different kinds of effects that went into these particular pieces. And then when you pull the tape off, you look at this, you've got these wonderful little vignettes with a natural white border. And in our moon viewing project in Haiga, I made this little accordion book with lots of these for background, with moons in the background. I did a lot of circles for those, and then all of the haiku that I wrote about moon viewing. And same thing with these small ones down here. So you tape off the large sheet of paper, and then you create a broadside. You just take your marker. You can tell this line followed right straight through up there. This came through here, but was separated by the tape. And then when you pull the tape off, you've got these just wonderful little pieces. So if you're thinking about doing a series, these could each be matted and framed on their own, and it could be considered a series. So you can do them in any size. There's just lots of possibilities. This is something else we did in that class that I taught, and I'm leaving it in here because I thought maybe you might find it kind of interesting. It's called Sync Art, and it was developed by a calligrapher, the late Dick Beasley. And the idea is you use a fairly wide, like an automatic pen or a metal pen, something that's very wide, or even a brush or a foam brush, and you make marks with sumi, and then you flush them under a tap while they're still wet. And what it does is pull out the interior of the sumi marks. These aren't terribly good examples. You can kind of see it here, what's happening. And then it also, that sumi ink will run across the paper, and it gives you kind of like a suminagashi background effect on all these. And again, the best paper, I think, for this is the text wove, because it dries completely flat, or 140-pound watercolor paper if you tape it down afterwards. And while the paper is still wet, you can also add color. I love the Dr. Martin's Tech inks added to the wet paper and letting it bleed in with the sumi. And this is a Sync Art stroke down here. You can see was flushed out the center of that mark. And then the addition of the color is can really be lovely. And you can also take a paper towel, a dry paper towel, and blot certain areas, and that gives you even more texture. And then you can also add some asemic writing in the wet, if the color, the Tech inks or the walnut ink. And in this next slide, you can see that it stays. You know, that ink just sinks into where you've written with a stylus of some kind. And you can see the sort of suminagashi effect that you get over here. Now, these are broadsides, so they aren't lovely little compositions in and of themselves, but if you took one of those viewfinders, you could find some lovely little pieces in here. And then I decided to leave this in too, because I thought maybe you might be interested. People are always asking, well, how do you determine a good composition? So when you're using your viewfinder, for example, and you want to have a focal point in the little vignette that you're framing out, if you just remember 3, and many of you already know this, but the rule of thirds is a way of finding the sweet spot on your composition without, or the golden section, without going through the whole mathematical formula of the Fibonacci code and all of that. This is a quick way of getting there. If you divide your axes over here into thirds, and then you connect those lines, where they interconnect here are your sweet spots. And this, I think, is the most powerful right here. I always consider that when I'm looking at a composition, or if I'm trying to add something that I want to give focus to the piece. And if you do this, you stay away from having that center focus. And you know that if the viewer comes in and looks at something that is focused right in the center, they're going to miss everything else that's going on in the piece. And if you have a focus just off like this, then the viewer's eye will continue to travel, and it'll just stay interested in that piece. And the rule of odds, these are sort of interrelated, because a simple way to make a composition more dynamic is to have an odd number, and ideally 3 focal points, or a main focal point, and then maybe 2 other things that complement that. And again, this eliminates the viewer's natural tendency to pair things up, and their eye just keeps moving across the piece, and they don't know why. You know, it just keeps them interested. And 3 really is the ideal number of elements. So keep this in mind when you're using that little viewfinder, trying to, or afterwards when you are maybe adding a little touch of red, or where you're going to put your chop. And that's another thing to consider. If you want the chop to be kind of a focal point, think about those sweet spots like that. Okay, so with loving thanks again to our Fumiko for her inspiration. And I think this was part of that presentation, wasn't it, Judy? She also showed us how to do these little wet on wet dot points with Sumi, which was really interesting. She was always just so inspiring in everything she shared with us. So a nod to Fumiko again with thanks for her wonderful inspiration. So hope you have fun with this. And the great thing is that it's pretty meditative and there's just no pressure. You can just have a good time and find those wonderful aha moments. This is my Sumi down here. You notice that when I put things on the floor to dry, she's always right in the middle of it. So she is aptly named. She is always into my Sumi. So I just included her to say hello. So with that, I will stop the share and I'll come back to you here and we'll go over to my handy dandy little demo table. Here I have a piece of felt. This is not heavily sized, so I'm not going to really go to town with my demo here, but I just wanted to share with you some kinds of things you can do with this. And here are some of my tools. Again, I really like the brushes that I made, the handmade brushes, because they have those wonderful tendrils on the end that are so great for being drippy and splattery. But when I first start out, I like to start out with a quick swipe of a foam brush, just because it adds some interest to the background, something that is there but is not overpowering. And I dip fairly quickly. I don't want to saturate that foam brush. And I'm going to come over here. I need to get sort of a light. Put some more water in that. And then I'm going to dip the tip just barely in the Sumi. And then I'm going to give it some color here. Now, one of the things, let me get a brush that's wet here. While it's still wet, it's kind of nice to add something that will run. I really didn't have it wet enough, but you can see various things that you can do with that. But these brushes get wet. They really hold ink. And they also sort of drip. So, and that's okay, because when you come over here, you want to they really make nice marks. I have a flyer on how to make your own bucktail brush. So if you're interested in that, I'd be happy to share it. I just taught that class a couple of weeks ago, and some beautiful brushes. Thanks to Melinda and Ted for this beautiful black bamboo that they shared with us. And then my husband did a great job of polishing these and finishing them off. But I love these brushes. They're just so much fun to use. So, because they really do sort of take on a life of their own. And so you can see, you don't really have to think about this very much for this particular part. I'm working kind of small here because I have a relatively small area that my IPVO will cover, and I'm going to try not to splatter everywhere else in my studio here as I just dipped this toothbrush in here. And I think what I'll do is find a nice clean spot. I'll put that little black piece of paper there, and then I'll kind of work around it a little bit. That's one good way to splatter. And another good way is just to take your brush and tap. And if you have a brush that has a fairly good point on it, you're going to get these directional things happening, which is really kind of fun. What I really like to do, though, is use these for that, because then you get almost strips. And I would do that, but it's really messy. So just keep that in mind. I'm already sort of spraying outside my spot here, but I'm gonna. But you can see what you can do with those. And you can get very directional with this too. So those are, I have that spot that's fairly open there, so I can kind of work around that. But you get the idea. I'm gonna. The foam brush is fun because you can do things like this. So in the background with kind of a lighter color, you can do a vine and that type of thing. Now you're looking at this and you're saying, well, this is a mess, but as soon as you get your little viewfinder going across this, you start seeing all kinds of fun little things. So with that, I'm going to share with you some of the other pieces. Here's the viewfinder. This is the larger size viewfinder, but see, I can find some really lovely pieces in here. You see that? And you can get a lot out of these. Maybe something up there, sideways. So the possibilities are really endless for what you can do with these viewfinders, any size, smaller for smaller books. And then if this wasn't so wet, I would actually do it, but you just take a pencil. Get hung up in the wet, but you get the idea, and you can create those. And then I'll show you what I do with the wet mounting here. Sumi doesn't get to come in my studio, so I can put this very wet one on the floor, and she won't be here to mess with it. Okay, so this is the Scotch positionable mounting adhesive. And what you do is just unroll it, and it's very tacky. You have to be careful because it tends to want to stick to your fingers. So you just have to kind of roll it out and not touch it too much. And then this is not a very good example. It's a piece of offcut of the Sumi, or the pomo. But you just lay these on here, I usually lay 2 rows. Then I cut that off, turn it upside down, and it comes with this. I just laid this in my wedding. So bring that up a bit. This mounting adhesive liner, and the stuff does not stick to it. So you turn your piece upside down that you've just cut off and you burnish it on. And then that gives you these pieces from which you can cut. These I've determined are vertical. So you can see these were mounted. Let me come in a little closer here. These were mounted on not some masa, but some white paper. And then I cut these apart and peel off that backing. And then I can mount it onto, here are some more examples of those. These were determined to be horizontal little vignettes that I've taken from some of those larger pieces. You can see. And I'm a calligrapher, so I like to leave room on a lot of these, and I usually plan for it. So if I want to write on them, I don't necessarily need to, but if I want to write on them, I usually leave room and think about that. But if you don't want to write on them, then you can just go at it. So here is an example. This was my Pomo exemplar book. These were cut from larger broadsides and mounted on the Scotch positionable mounting adhesive. So you can see this was a very wet with the little 100% Sumi ink added afterwards. Very splattery. I can still write on these if I want to, but I decided, in fact, that was my original intent, but then I decided, no, I think I just like this as a, let me come in a little closer so you can see these more up close. But a lot of the wet on wet, and that's why the heavily sized Schwen is really good, because then you can really do some heavy washes. Here was another example of washes with a little bit of the Chinese white ink added. So they can either be very crisp like this, or they can be very sort of wet on wet. And then every once in a while you get some of these really interesting marks that you can make with it. Some of these I really like, and I really would like to do a haiku or something on them. Here's that one that was very wet. And then I think I probably used, I can find it here, probably used the 3M dust remover for that while it was still very wet. And just some more. This is just some examples, and a lot of contrast of the tones with the straight Sumi. So you get the idea. This was done with a very wet brush on a very wet background. So that was mounting them. Now, something that I've been doing a lot lately is, oh, and by the way, here's that Shikishi board. Back out here. These are great to work on because it's not as quite as absorbent as it gives you the same kind of effect as working on Schwen, but you don't have to mount it afterwards, and it's just a harder surface for you to be able to do some other kinds of things on. But I lately have on watercolor paper. I did these at my retreat last summer. I tape off, as I showed you in the PowerPoint, I tape off a large sheet of watercolor paper, 140-pound watercolor paper. And then I do my broadside across the whole thing that's been taped off. And then when you take the tape off, it gives you those wonderful little vignettes. And here is one that I will do. You can see I've taped, and by the way, the micropore tape, which is a medical tape that you can get at any pharmacy, is great for this because it is good for delicate surfaces. It's not going to pull up the fibers of your watercolor paper or your whatever kind of paper you're using. You don't want to do this with Schwen, of course. You want to use a heavier paper, but you can also see through it. So I can tell, I want to make sure that the pencil line is right at the center. And come back and show you those in just a minute. But first, I'm going to finish taping this off. This is the micropore tape. Comes in 1/2 inch, 1 inch, comes in even wider. But usually I will use, for this particular one, because I'm working fairly small, I'm using the 1/2 inch tape. If I can find the end of it here. There we go. Now I have taped off the sides and the center. I just have to do these two, but you can see, I can see through it so that I know that I'm getting it centered. And one more. I'm working in a very small area here, so. Usually when I'm doing a pomo broadside, I do it in my garage where I can set up and just have lots of room so I can do several at once. Typically, I don't do it here because there's just not enough room to work. So I'm going to go back here. And again, I'm going to, oh, and I work on these when I'm doing something where I want to go over the edge of the piece. And several of you have heard me talk about this ad nauseum, I think. I love these Dollar Tree chopping mats in the kitchen section. They're wonderful. They clean up easily. It used to be 2 for $1, but now, of course, it's 2 for $1.25. They're absolutely wonderful for this type of thing. So I like it when I get sort of a variegated effect from the foam brush because it just is a nice backgrounder there. And let's see. I'm just going to give it a little bit of that. Let's do an insole. And you can see I'm going right over the tape. So this is going to come off. Each one of these is going to be a separate piece that is going to say something different. And one of my lovely little Levinson brushes, I think I'm going to do a little Semic writing. There's so many ahas when you pull the tape off of these. And let's a little more of the flick here. With this one. And it gives me, and you don't have to fill up the space either. Like this little vignette over here, that's sort of off to the side. I think I'll just leave that. I don't want to do too much to it. But you can take a look at each one of these and say, well, you know, that could really use a little something more. Like that. And I think I'll just do that a little bit more like that. And I'm not going to do too much. The tendency is that you want to fill this thing up. And that's fine if you're going to be working with small pieces, very small pieces, but it's really nice to have that white space there. I want to do is just pick up some of this so that I can pull up the tape for you. I'm going to let it dry for just a minute and show you some of these little vignettes that I've done from these large broadsides. And usually there's a little piece at the bottom of your large broadside that is like an inch off that you can keep your little notes. This one, I knew I wanted to do 4x6, and I was using the foam brush and then a special pen that I've got called the Brody pen. So I kept some notes for that. But I had a lot, it was a large sheet, and I had a lot that I did with these. And again, I wanted to leave a lot of white space in this particular one. But you can see these are just wonderful little vignettes, and you can map these with that white border still around the edge, which just naturally frames them off. But you can imagine what this was. This was probably a large sweep that went into the next piece over here. But for this, it was just this wonderful, unique little single spot. And this was just the foam brush stamping a vine. Anyway, you get the idea. These were all the little 4x6s. And now typically I like to make books out of these, but some of them are just wonderful. Look at this one. This I used a variegated foam brush. I did, remember the bubbles that we did at one point? The Sumi infused bubbles, I did that up here. I used the air compressor to get these little tendrils. Let's come in here. To get these little tendrils that come off. And then, of course, splatter. And again, I used the Brody pen with the full strength Sumi ink. But this is really a little standalone piece. I mean, I don't think I want to put that into a book. I would like to just, I think, make that a piece of its own. So you can see when you have this contrast and the splattered background, it really, I'll come in again so you can see more closely that there really is a lot of splatter going on back here. And how nice that little quick mark of asemic writing is. to add to this. It makes it almost ethereal. And this, again, was a wet on wet. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of a nice effect as well. Oops, that's upside down. That's the way it goes. It's all around. But you can do some final definition with your sumi. This is sort of essence of bamboo done with the foam brush. This was, again, that sort of wet on wet splatter technique, but with that simple first stroke of the foam brush. And the contrast of adding a little full-strength sumi at the end is really nice against some of these, and you almost need it because some of these backgrounds are so soft. So those were pretty fun. And this one, I made a lot of notes here, different. Now I used a Levinson brush and a 5-prong automatic pen. See if I have one of those here. That's what this looks like. Now you can't use these, or you probably shouldn't use these on Schwen because it'll tear it up, obviously, but it's wonderful on the 140-pound watercolor paper. So I used this, and then I used, for a lot of these swipes, I used a piece of mat board and a toilet paper roll. So there were lots of notes that went with that one. And that was, let's see if I can see some examples of, well, maybe that was a 5-prong pen. Maybe this one wasn't labeled correctly, but anyway, these are some others that you can see. I have lots of room on some of these for calligraphy if I want to make books. I like to do lots of roomy quotes and that kind of thing on some of these pieces. And some of them are so light like this that I can write right over the top. Okay. So you get the idea. There's all kinds of things you can do with those. They're great for cards. And here are some of the other books. This one I don't think I've written in this one. But I love to make these little books with these. Because I just, as I mentioned, those little aha moments when you find these little wonderful vignettes. Now this one, I think I could do some writing in because it's got some, but like that one, I don't think I'd want to do much to it at all. Lots of splatter on that. Some of them are, starkly contrasting, and others are much more subtle. Some of them are just a quick swipe like that. So you get the idea here. This is the seasons. I called it the seasons because I thought most of these are sort of reflective of certain seasons, like the wetness, the splatter, something like that. More spring, maybe summer. And then I have these little chops that I've hand cut too that are very organic and very nature-based. And so a lot of times I'll incorporate those into these as well. And for those of you that are not calligraphers, this one I'm calling The Earth Moves Me. there were a series of little poems that I found online that there was no author attribution, so I just picked them up and ran with them. I had these small ones that I had done that had a little bit of, it's a little hard to see here, a little bit of walnut ink in them, so they were a little warmer. And they were very organic. So like golden desert sands, shifting with the wind's demand, nature's hot embrace. So I picked up these little poems and I just printed them. Whoops, here, just printed them on some cardstock and put them opposite. This one was about spring. These are hard to see in this light here, but they're really simple little vignettes, and they're kind of nice with that natural white border. Winter's cold caress, blankets the earth in frozen dress, nature's quiet sleep. Summer's heat, ablaze. This is really pretty strong. I'm just sorry that you can't see it as well here with this light. I wonder if I turned that light off. You could see it a little bit better. There. That one's about summer. River winds its way through, carving the earth with liquid play. Now they need to be a little bit more contrasting, I think, for you to be able to see them here, but get the idea. I love making those little books. And here, as part of our moon viewing project, or a couple of little small ones that I made. And these were also those little vignettes that happen to have something like a moon behind them. Backlit exhibit, Mother Nature's silhouette. And these are wonderful because they stand up, so you can display them on the shelf. Here's another one of those. The world moves on. The moon stays put. So those were, I did a whole series of those that I just really enjoyed putting together. But these were some smaller ones, these little vignettes done from a larger broadside and a viewfinder. And then I don't know if Lois is here, but I'm hoping to do a book that has in a very small form the shodo that we've learned over the past couple of years. And right now we're working on the character for snake because we're coming up on Year of the Snake. So I would do the Western name and then the Japanese name of what it is. But I'm hoping to put together a little book of those, maybe for the spring show and tell for shodo. Let's see, are you tired of seeing these? Here's another book that I put together that's an accordion. I have to keep coming in and out here. Let me turn this back on, maybe. This one I plan to write, you can see this, it's a 4-panel. I plan to write some calligraphy here and some calligraphy here. And a lot of times I'll look at these little vignettes and I'll have them inspire what my haiku is, rather than doing an image inspired by a haiku. So it's sort of a backwards way of doing it, but I can get very inspired sometimes by what these are telling me. Here's one that I did write in. The world is but a canvas to our imaginations. That was Thoreau. And one more I haven't written in this one yet, but and you can lay these out so that they kind of have a directional feel to them too. So you need to kind of lay them down before you glue them in to make sure that they are saying what you want them to say visually. And I could probably maybe do some writing on one of these. So that's what I had to share with you. Now let's go back here and take a look at this little piece we put together. I'm going to take the tape off. Usually I tell people don't take the tape off until everything is completely dry, which is important. And usually I'll take it off very gingerly because you don't want that to pull up the fibers of the paper. This is really fun because when you look at your overall broadside, you think to yourself, there's no way there's going to be anything in there that is interesting or that will be nice, but it's just continual aha moment of finding those little vignettes and all of a sudden having these wonderful little finished pieces. Whoop, looks like I have to do that one first. But this 140-pound cold press watercolor paper is great to work with because it's hard to damage the fibers. Again, I have to pull this up. And you can be pretty vigorous with your mark making too, without hurting anything. One more and we're done. And it's also fun to take your tiny red chop and chop these. It just sort of finishes them off. And cut these apart. You can erase the lines, but you really don't have to because you're going to be cutting right on top of them. If I can find myself an X-Acto knife here. And it's fun to do several of these at one time. And boy, is it fun then when you, and don't cut them apart all at once because it's almost joyous overload to do too many of them at one time. You want to kind of parcel them out so that you can enjoy the process of seeing what you've created little by little. Now, this is where you can go in and add afterwards if there's something that is needing something a little extra. And you won't like all of them. You can probably save all of them in some way by adding something or just simply by chopping it. We'll finish it off, but all of them won't be totally to your liking. But they aren't finished until they're finished. Now, I really like this one. And you don't have to mount these either because they're already pretty good to go. You can just mount them right into your, let's see if I've got a, This isn't quite the right size, but you can just mount them right onto your black cardstock or the front of a card or whatever. Usually if I'm going to do these for cards, I'll mount them with about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch either border around the edge, and then I'll mount that onto the card. You can, let me grab a little chop here. One of my little rubber stamp chops. And now I can add something to that, or I can just leave it alone. And these, there are a couple of these that I think I would like to go in and do something else to. This has got, you can't see, but it's got that foam brush in the background, which is kind of nice, adding a different kind of direction to it. But you can add some little asemic writing. Here, maybe. Just to give it some extra something. I don't know what I'd do to that one. It needs something else though. So I will go back into a lot of these and I'll determine what I want to do to add or change. But the base is there and I can take it from there. So that is, those are the taped off sheets that I wanted to share with you that I think you could have some real fun with, especially with the pomo, the splatter technique. I'm going to come back to you here. And there. Got a real mess going here. And ask what questions you have about this process.
I have a couple questions, Sally.
Okay.
Yeah, one is one problem I have sometimes is telling my papers apart because I haven't been very good about labeling them. And how do you tell what's text weave from like a 90-pound watercolor paper or heavier cardstock? They're all kind of similar. Is there a characteristic of text? Well, that text wove. Yeah, text wove.
It does have a watermark that will tell you it's text wove.
Oh, okay. So hold it up to the light.
Hold it up to the light. It's an Arches product, so it's the Arche in French, Christelle, not Arches.
Oh,
Arche.
That's correct.
It should have the Arche logo.
Oh, okay, okay, good. And another one is when you're doing your brushes, making them, how do you get that nice tapered point on, and what brush material are you using? And how do you get that point?
They're bucktail. And if you are using bucktail, and I would show you one, but bucktail, usually when we make the brushes, the hair is attached to a piece of the skin. And that ensures that you aren't going to lose hairs, that is, and you also get this natural taper when you do.
Oh, okay.
It's you need to make sure that the hairs are attached to a piece of the skin. And then the taper will be just automatically nice, but they're one of a kind, unique. I learned this process 40 years ago from my friend Susan Russell, and she was doing these amazing floral pieces with these handmade bucktail brushes. And so we said, well, teach us. So following year, she taught us how to make the brushes, and I haven't looked back. I've got a collection of, I can't tell you how many brushes, but this. Here are just some of them. And if you go to a fly tying shop, like a Bass Pro or Cabela's or someplace like that, they have dyed bucktail, of course, to, ensure that the fish are going to come to attract them.
Yes.
Anyway, but I found, and I have used this one any number of times, that they not only wash out well, but the color stays. So I don't know what kind of dye they use with these, but they're really kind of fun. But the natural bucktails are lovely too, but they come to this just lovely tapered point naturally.
Okay, good.
You pull it off the string.
And I just had one more question. What was the name of that company that you order your rubber stamps from to do the chops?
Rubber Stamp Champ. In
Oh,
fact,
okay.
I have, I can send out to, I'll send it to you, Christelle. I have a flyer from when I taught this a couple of weeks ago about how to order one of those chops from Rubber Stamp Champ and which size to get and how to create your black and white artwork to send to them. And then you make sure that you request that you want red ink. And I'll tell you what, these things last forever. And I was doing for those of you that were recipients of my Rumi calendars from a few years back, I was doing a run of 75 Rumi calendars every year. And it would be the front cover, the back cover, and 12 months that would flip. So that was 14 pages, and they were simple Sumi drawings or Sumi paintings and Rumi quotes. And I had to chop everyone. And you can imagine a run of 75, 14 for each one, going back to the stamp or the Cinnabar paste each time to stamp them and then not having them dry very quickly was just out of the question. So that's when I went out researching and found Rubber Stamp Champ, and well, let me share with you my collection of Rubber Stamp Champ. I have one for Year of the Dragon that I put on all of my envelopes, my correspondence this year, and I will probably have one for Year of the Snake. I had one for Year of the Rabbit. And then I have what they call leisure chops, leisure stamps, one love. But anyway, they're self-inking. So, they just are. Here's another one I put on all of my envelope correspondence, a snail for you.
Yeah.
So, but what I do, you see, is I do a lot of these chops that are my name. Here's one that is fairly big. You can see it says Sally Penley. I design in black and white something like this, so you can design it fairly large, and then you have them made. In fact, I have that one in here someplace. You have them made very small, so then I can put that. I do that on a lot of my books and cards, and the smaller pieces, the taped off pieces like I just showed you. So those are, and you can do them in, here's a little tiny one that I've got in a circle too. It says Sally Penley.
Yeah, those are really nice. This is fantastic. I got so much inspiration. I want to make Christmas cards like that now and add metallic paints, and something like that would really be fun to mess around with metallic inks too.
Right.
Would you have
metallic inks would be great.
Yeah.
But these are once I discovered these, the sky was obviously the limit for me, and I had a whole bunch made. But I do have an instruction sheet about how to order, because it can be a little tricky, because most of these that you order from Rubber Stamp Champ, of course, are return address labels. So they get a little perplexed, and they don't call me anymore because they know me, but They used to call me and say, you just want this little square right in the middle of this long rectangular thing? And I said, yep,
Oh,
I want. So,
oh,
and I've
okay.
had a lot of my classes have gone to them too. So they're used to creating the chops now. So I don't think they'll probably question it if you want to order one.
Oh, I'm glad you told us that because I remember getting that sheet from you from your class and I tried it and I couldn't quite figure out how to get them my design. I couldn't figure that out.
I can pull this up if you are interested in my sharing that with you so that you know how to order them.
Hmm.
If you can hold on just a second here, I'll see if I can go find it. That was,
If you also send me the handouts, like you said, I can also
okay,
send it by email, sorry, with the video link and the other handout.
okay. Well, let me see what I've got here.
That's great.
Actually, do you want me to post the actual handout for the POMO into the chat right now?
Sure, you can do that. And I am trying to find this little chop piece. Hold on. How to carve. Oh, here we go. Rubber stamp champ. It's taking its own sweet time coming up. Here we go. Okay, can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
This is what it looks like. And you go in and you select the size, and this little handout tells you that the small ones that I get. And by the way, another reason I started getting these was because of all the Edagami exchanges that I was a part of. These small ones are perfect for Edagami because you don't want a big giant chop on a little postcard. So that's when I started ordering these 4910, which are the smallest. And then you click on customize, and then you download this piece of, or send a JPEG of this black and white artwork that you want made into a chop. And so you browse, put your photo in there, and then you upload it. And you make sure that you select red for color if you do want this to be in red. And then they will show you how it's going to line up on that horizontal format. And so you just make sure that you proof it and it's correct, and then you go to checkout. So it's relatively simple if you have the steps like that. And they come fairly quickly. You can get them in a week to 10 days.
Wow.
So
Great.
there is that. I will stop the share.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
I also have a backgrounder on chops if you're interested too, that just tells you a little history, and I can include that too.
Please.
Sally,
Thank
I have
you.
a question for you.
Okay.
Okay, this is Judy. The tape that you use, is that surgical tape?
It is a kind of surgical tape. It's called
Okay.
micropore.
Gotcha. Okay.
And you can tell when you go to purchase it, it's transparent almost.
Okay.
So you can
And
see
you can
through
get it. You can get it where?
Well, I think I ordered mine on Amazon, but you can get it at any pharmaceutical or medical supply place, I'm sure. It's called micropore.
P-O-R-E.
P-O-R-E.
Gotcha.
And it's
Sally,
great because you can see through it and where you're laying it down.
Marilyn is asking how much are the chops? Roughly.
The chops are, I'm going to say about $12. Maybe they are not that expensive, and you can get them even less expensive if you want to get an actual rubber stamp, they have that too. I mean, they are called Rubber Stamp Champ. So you can, I've had a couple of these made into just regular rubber stamps, and those are really inexpensive.
Wow, thank you.
It was a real find for me, believe me. And I've shared this when I teach origami. I always share the information about this too, because people always want to, they don't particularly want to carve their own chop for the origami. And it's nice to have a little thing with your name on it, or something that is meaningful to you or indicative of you.
So Sally, is that from China? You order it from China?
No, this is an American company that sells
Oh,
address, return address stamps. So
Wow.
what we're doing is just introducing them to
Uh-huh.
the world of
Oh,
sumi.
wow. Mhm.
So, and you can order things in different ink colors too. That was something that I learned early on. You need to make sure that you remember that you want red ink. That's part of that process. It's
Mm.
important.
Okay, thank you.
In Tacoma, there used to be, a few years ago, I went to it, but I'm not sure it's still there. Probably it's been there forever. A Tacoma rubber stamp shop. And I've been in, it's kind of near the armory, the old armory up there, near the Tacoma Library and the big library, everything. Yeah, and I went in there once and she said, oh yeah, just bring any image you want in and we can make it into a rubber stamp. So
Great.
that might be a good place too for people, convenient for them to go in and have somebody they can actually work with there
Right.
on a taken one. But that was like down on Yakima or Tacoma Avenue, or one of those streets
Okay.
that run parallel to each other, close together.
Well, the thing that's so great about they're the ideal, they have a lot of different stamps at Rubber Stamp Champ, but the ideal self-inking stamps are wonderful because it seems like they never run out of ink, and you just can use them over and over again. I do have one caveat about that though. I stamped that on something that I had was going to wet mount, and it's not permanent ink. It's not like a Cinnabar. So it ran, and so I have this sort of blurry red blob, and it was a piece that I just loved too. I went to Lois's to learn how to do wet mounting, and we used that as one of the examples, and the chop just disintegrated. So so you want to make sure if you're going to do wet mounting, do not use these chops. Use your regular Cinnabar paste. Oh, and the other thing is, if you want to have your name translated and an actual like soapstone chop made, I go to Oriental Art Supply down in Huntington Beach, and you just send your name and you order the chop and they send it to you, and then I stamp it in black. And so then I have this black and white image, and I send that off to Rubber Stamp Champ, and they have done, let me see if I can find that one.
That's a clever idea.
Oh, here's one. I have a stamp that I had them make for me that says Left-Handed Sally. And so I had that chop made, carved at Oriental Art Supply, and then I stamped it and sent it to Rubber Stamp Champ, and now I have a smaller version of that in the ideal self-inking stamps. But here's one. You can see it was one of a round chop that I had them carve for me. And then I had it made into the small 4910 size. And I use this one a lot on my origami postcards.
And so I have a quick question. Can you change the ink when you run out of ink on your
I've never done that because I've always just had the red ink, and I've never run out. I mean, one of them is getting maybe just a little bit lighter, but I mean, I have run those calendars and those stamps are still working for me, so they
So
last
you,
a long time.
so you're going to order a new one, or are you just going to replace the ink cartridge into your?
I would just order a new one. They aren't
Okay.
that expensive.
Okay.
I just was
There's
looking
something
on
like-
the Oriental site. This is Bev. And it
Mhm.
looks, they'll do your name digitally, so you don't, if you weren't ever planning to use the soapstone chop, it looks like Oriental Art Supply will do a digital translation of your name. And then you could send that off to the stamp company. So if you didn't want to do a chop, a physical chop, apparently they do that now.
Well, actually, that's a great idea.
That's good.
Now, thanks for letting me know. Now I have to go do that.
It's I think it's $6.95, so they will charge you for the, if I'm reading this correctly. Maybe I'll put the link into the chat.
Oh, that would be good.
That's
Yeah.
Oriental
Thank
Art
you.
Supply. Oriental Art Supply.
OrientalArtSupply.com.
Okay.
For those of you that are familiar with Ningye, this is his company.
Ah,
It's a good company.
A number of books.
I
Other
will,
questions?
I will share it also into the email I will send to everybody.
yeah, I'm gonna actually do this, so I'll see if it works the way I want, and then I'll send it off to the, what was the name of that company again? The Tacoma, or the stamp company?
Rubber Stamp Champ?
Rubber Stamp Champ. Okay, so I'll try this and I'll let everybody know how it goes, because I've wanted one, but I just didn't feel like, I don't feel like I have the technical skill to carve it myself into soapstone. So I'll probably get an actual physical one, but they'll do the translation for you too. So I think that's what
Right.
it's all about.
It will. That's a
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
very good point. I forgot that they do that. And a lot of times when you order a chop, they'll send you a little card with your name translated. So that's really all you need. You're right.
But if you wanted to use the Cinnabar, you'd need the physical one. So
Right. You would. Or you can get it done in the actual rubber stamp,
right.
and then use the Cinnabar with that.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. It is pretty fun once you dive into this stuff. It's kept me off the streets and out of the bars, as my husband would say.
You know, I always have these grand ideas about what I want to do for the holidays, and then I always kind of actually just sit down and do it in November, and I always run out of time. But this was just, you know, your work is just amazing to me, and these larger broadsheets is such a good idea to extract interesting pieces from it.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a continual aha too. I mean, you can't believe how many wonderful little vignettes you can get out of a large sheet that looks like a mess. So go play with it, and I think you'll have a good time with it. And we can thank again, Jeannie, we can thank your mother again for her inspiration. None of us would be doing this, I think, if it weren't for her introduction.
Yes.
So
That's exactly right.
so with that, Christelle, I will send you a couple of things that we talked about today that maybe you can send out.
That I will.
Okay.
As soon as the video is ready to be sent out, I will also add all the handouts you send my way.
Okay. Marilyn, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm new. Is the Cinnabar that you talk about an ink stamp pad?
It's an ink. Let me get one of my Cinnabar pastes here and I'll show you.
Thank you.
By the way, something that I really, or the stamp pad, if you want to get a regular commercial stamp pad, the one that I like the best is this VersaFine Clair. and the color is tulip red. It seems to be the best and the longest lasting.
Did you say VeriSign?
VersaFine.
Oh, VersaFine, Fine.
Yeah. Oh, and
Thank you.
here's one of my chops that I had done at Oriental Art Supply. You can see that it comes in this little wonderful little box, and it shows you the orientation, and it's carved in soapstone. And I don't see the cinnabar paste right off. This was my very first chop that I had done back in the 70s. I studied Western calligraphy with Lloyd Reynolds, the father of the rebirth of American calligraphy, and he called me Sinistral Sally. I had left-handed Sally, so I had a chop made out of black onyx that said Sinistral Sally.
Sinistral.
Sinistral, yeah, left. That's where the word sinister comes from. So those of you that are left-handed, I think it's a statement about us. I don't seem to have the cinnabar paste. If any of the rest of you have any handy, it's in a round tin. I have several versions of it. It comes in a round tin, and it's a gooey, sort of a gooey paste. And it takes a long time to dry. It also doesn't come off fingers very easily. So
Where do you get it?
good. There you go.
I had eye injections this morning, so I couldn't see very well.
Oh, there. Now can you see we've got Dorothy in the spot
Yes, thank
here.
you, Dorothy. Where do you get this?
You can get that from Oriental Art Supply. Any art, actually you can probably get it at what's the name of the Artist and Craftsman Supply in Tacoma.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dorothy,
Yes.
you're gonna have a problem getting that off.
I know. You pull it up to the middle,
Yep.
and then you tap with your
Chop.
Chop.
tap, and then you push it down on your image, and it helps if you have your paper sitting on on felt or something soft.
Or a stack of paper usually works
stack of
pretty
paper.
well. And
Yeah.
then you rock the chop a little bit back and forth, forward and sideways.
Oh,
You rock it so that you make sure that you get a good coverage.
great.
Sally,
Can I add a little something?
Yeah.
Also, cinnabar is mercuric oxide, I think.
Oh,
is
really?
Very, very poisonous. And
Yes.
so it is not a good idea to actually put your finger into it. And especially it's not a good idea to use with children who may put their fingers in their mouths. So just be careful. This is not a non-toxic, safe product. It's a very ancient Chinese method of adding the seal.
And they're all dead, so you know.
So Dorothy, wash your hands.
I'm going to go and make a little OxyClean paste, and the two chemicals ought to work. Put me right at it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I have some that is really nasty. One of the ones I have is really dark red, and it's exceptionally gooey and it's exceptionally messy. So, you know, they aren't all created equal.
Sally, does it dry out? The cinnabar? Does it? dry out?
It doesn't dry out very fast. Some of the cinnabar paste I've had for probably 30 years.
Oh.
And it still is pretty gooey.
When Yu
Okay.
Ming did these on our bylaws, he advised blotting it many times. So I take a tissue and I blot it as many times as the color comes off on the tissue. And that way it doesn't smear when you put it away. or.
I think that's really smart. That's good advice because the stuff does not, well, it's why it doesn't dry out after 30 years. It does not dry quickly. And if you stack something else on top of it, whatever you stack on it is going to be permanently impressed with your with your image.
Sally,
Yeah.
when we're talking about ourselves and our grandkids or whatever, your pets also. A lot of
Oh,
your
yeah.
pets will go lick something that has a certain smell to it. And it's something I learned early on. You have to really keep away from.
Right.
That's right.
Um,
Definitely.
This is so that link that I sent before is about for a video. So I would disregard that till I can figure it out, and then I'll send an email to tell you how you actually do that. I think that the link I put in is a video that tells you how to do it. So
The link to
Yes,
where?
you did send a link for the video into the
yes,
chat. Yes.
rather than buying the actual having your name translated. So just disregard that link that's in the chat because it's not how to get your name translated. It's to purchase a video.
Oh,
So
Okay.
I will figure it out and I'll send an email out to the group.
thank you.
Oh, good.
Yu Ming has also been known to carve chops.
That's right. He has.
I
So
don't know if he still has time to do that, but
Yeah,
Well,
he
he'd
just
be
did
a
one
good
for
source
me.
of information.
He just did one for me, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he still does it.
Well, that's
And you can
now
go
you-
on the Paragon Art Supply, paragonarts.com. I will put also the information into the email I'll send out to all the members, but maybe I could list the places where you can get the chops and ink.
Yeah.
Okay, the Cinnabar paste.
The Cinnabar paste.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I know. Dorothy?
Christelle, is there a way that we can save the chat? I used to be able to do that on my computer, save the chat on my computer, but I don't.
I received the chat from Zoom.
Uh-huh.
They sent it to me.
Okay. And then how do we get it from you?
I can post. I don't know who wants the chat.
I would like.
Well, if you pull
Oh,
the
okay.
information out of the chat that you think
Yeah.
needs to be
Yeah.
shared, that would be, I have, usually when I'm teaching, I have a tech host who does all that for me, and she takes the chat and reformats it into a Word document. So it doesn't look like gibberish, which is really helpful.
Mhm.
But you can just pull out, important information that you think people would like to know.
Yeah, that's what I'm planning to do because we got a lot of links today. But usually when I have a lot of comments, what I do is that I copy and paste it and send it to the presenter.
Oh, good.
Oh.
That's good.
Sally,
Sally?
one
Yeah.
more question. Oh, those, the Doc Martin, tech inks, those are permanent inks, and
Yes.
are there a reason you use those more than, any of the other brands of inks?
I use those just because they're very vibrant, and I like the vibrancy of the colors of those. And they have one that is a brown, it's almost like a walnut ink that is just a little bit brighter than a walnut ink. And I just like the colors. No, there's no reason why I'm using those necessarily over others.
I've wanted to try them, but
They're permanent.
yeah, good.
Sally, do you
Yes.
teach online?
I do.
Where can we get information about that, your classes?
All of my classes, and now all of the classes that I've taught around Sumi, like Sumi mark making, and soon I will have the brush and chop class. They're all in video. So if you go to sallypenley.com/videos, you'll see what's available.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, let me pull up just a second here. I'm gonna get rid of some background things here. I have a whole bunch of stuff in the background that I have to get rid of before I can find it. Let me pull this up real quick.
I put the link into the chat.
Okay. So I can send this to you too, Christelle, if you want me to. These are all the videos that I have available. Some of them come with materials kits, the bookmaking classes. You get a full materials kit sent in the mail with that too. So those are all the videos that are available. And then my 2025 classes, I'll be teaching pointed brush calligraphy, the pleated scroll, beginning bookmaking, and a class called Make It and Hang It. So no Sumi
Great.
classes next year, but, and then added to the videos, I just received from my tech host the video for the Make a Brush and Carve a Chop class that I just did 2 weeks ago. And so that will be added shortly as well.
Thank you.
Let me get this. Okay. Are we done with questions? Have any more? I guess not. Okay, well, thank you all. And thanks again to Fumiko for inspiring us. And I guess I will send everything that we talked about to you, Christelle, and then we'll get it out to people.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sally. It was a wonderful presentation,
Yes.
as always.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.